Good morning and welcome to Elevenses. It's show number 349. It's Sunday the 9th of July and today's show is a recording that I made the previous day. So what have I got for you today? Well, a scooter battery fire has destroyed bikes and buildings in China. The MCIA appear ready to accept e-power as the motive power for learner motorcycles. If you buy a Husqvarna, you can now buy a matching training shoe, and I ask if £50 is too much to pay for a Muc-Off AirTag holder. The new 700 Twin from CFMoto is another bike filling the middleweight ranks, and then finally we'll have a quick look at the use of collisionplot to see where bike crashes actually happen. And today I'll be revealing how roundabouts are actually motorcycle crash spots. So grab yourselves a brew, settle down for the next 30 minutes or so. And just a quick reminder, this is a recorded show today. And I won't be able to respond directly to you because I am not live on air, but I will get back to you as soon as I can if you do leave a comment. And of course I always like to see what people have to say about the show. And so on with the news anyway. What have we got for you today? Well, actually I'm going to start with the second story I mentioned, and this is about the MCIA. Now I mentioned in a show just recently the MCIA and the National Motorcycle Council had met with the UK ministers to talk about the transition to a future that doesn't include fossil fueled motorcycles. And something else that I did mention, I believe, was that the EU have approved an exemption to the ban on all new internal combustion engines to allow a derogation for vehicles that run exclusively on e-fuels. They will be able to remain on the market after 2035. Now, if you think this means that we can forget the problem and that there won't be any electric bikes to worry about and it's all going to be hunky-dory with a petrol engine future, think again. Now, the problem is that e-fuels and biofuels, the related biofuels, are never going to be a solution to keep ICE engines running. Now, there are two problems. The first is that they're not emission-free. They may be carbon neutral, but they still produce NOx pollutants, which is a problem, of course, in cities. So there's a fair chance that they could find themselves banned from town centres anyway. The big problem is actually delivering anything other than very small quantities of expensive fuel. Now, there are pilot plants up and running, and they will be expanded, no doubt, to keep MotoGP, for example, running on e-fuel. But for the average biker and car owner, e-fuels are biofuels, and they're non-starters. Now, not surprisingly, because it means a complete change of pace, really, the industry is pushing hard for an extension to the life of ICE engine bikes, and by extension, of course, an extension to the refining and distribution of petrol. Now, Tony Campbell, who's the CEO of the MCIA, that's the Motorcycle Industry Association here in the UK, by the way, was recently interviewed by Motorcycle News, and he said that the industry needed the date for ICE bikes to be extended to 2040 or beyond. So he's talking about 2 decades from now, rather than the sort of 7 years that the government is actually hoping for, because they said they'd like to bring it forward to 2030 from the 2035 date the EU's already set. But tucked away in that interview, and something that was given zero prominence in the report, was a line that suggests that the MCIA are actually about to throw small petrol engine bikes under the metaphorical bus if they can get that extension for the bigger bikes. So what Tony Campbell actually said is this, quote, "Worst case scenario, the 11 kilowatt segment, we could live with that. The market is already moving in that direction." So the 11 kilowatt, that's the 14.6 horsepower bikes, that's up to 125. Those are the A1 learner bikes, basically, so mopeds up to 125 cc's. And what I read this to mean is that the MCIA know that there are already many manufacturers of these small e-bikes, and what they're saying is that these e-bikes can actually replace small capacity motorcycles and mopeds. Now, frankly, I find that a quite astonishing statement, because whilst it's pretty obvious that building electric motorcycles which are relatively lowly powered, relatively short range, is relatively easy and cheap because you don't need a big battery or a powerful electric motor. It's also an admission that that they are feasible completely undermines the argument that it's small petrol engine bikes that are the saviours, if you like, for commuter transport, in-town transport, because that's the argument that's been made, is that small motorcycles are very fuel efficient and they produce relatively low levels of emissions. They're carbon friendly, they're NOx friendly, but if you basically admit that electric bikes can do the job, then where's that argument that motorcycles are a greener form of transport than cars? And that's one that the MCIA and other bodies like the IEM also repeated it just the other day. However, there are of course problems with this switch to electric, and one of them is that if we're going to replace petrol engine bikes and scooters with the electrically powered equivalents, we do need to ensure that there are decent safety standards. And right now, one of the genuine concerns about e-bikes and e-cycles and the e-step scooters is the quality of the battery on cheap imports. And these are the very bikes, of course, which Tony Campbell was talking about. And there have been a number of fires, and e-step scooters and e-cycles are banned from the underground here in London, for example. And this picture maybe will give you an answer as to why that is. Have a look at this picture. There we go. Now you can see, I'll just zoom in the centre of the picture, you can see that there is actually a scooter catching fire in the background there. It's an electric sort of moped. And this is what happened within minutes. So now you can see most of the row of bikes is actually ablaze, and the fire is spreading upwards across the front of the building too. And it turns out that within minutes the blaze was so fierce it actually engulfed 30 nearby vehicles, and the flames had gone on to damage several floors of the building and two adjacent businesses as well as the one with the bikes parked outside. So extensive damage caused there. According to a local government official, why did it happen? Well, they said the spread of the fire was due to the lack of prompt firefighting measures initially, which led to the rapid spread of the fire. And I have to admit myself, I did wonder why nobody just walked up to that burning bike and just pulled it out of all the other bikes. It could probably have been done fairly safely first thing. And it also seemed to take the firefighting crew a long time to arrive. Watching the video, which has gone online, the blaze was well established by the time they got there, and it took them 20 minutes to put it out as well. Fortunately, no casualties reported. So, okay, now just a quick reminder, you are tuned to Elevenses here today. It goes out Wednesdays and Sundays at 11 on Facebook and on YouTube usually. Today's show is a recording, as I am busy doing other things tomorrow morning, but most of my shows go out live. Very occasionally I do miss one, so if you want to catch up, the place to go is YouTube, my Survival Skills UK channel. Alright, okay, so cross-branding, that's a marketing technique which involves two usually unrelated brands working together to create a new product which they hope shows off both brands. And for example, we've seen Ducati themed laptops, and here is an example of co-branding involving motorcycles. This is a Jack Daniels styled Indian, and I have to say that that's probably not one of the cleverer moves ever, since there is still a particular problem with drink riding in the US. But anyway, just in case you want everybody to know you have a Husqvarna tucked up in the garage whilst you're out running, or maybe you just want to pretend you have one, the German brand Puma now have the shoe for you. And this is it. It's a Husqvarna branded shoe, as you can see in the Husqvarna colour scheme. It's got Husqvarna logos on it, and it's the Puma Nitro 2. It's described as an all distance running shoe. And as you might have guessed already, it's only available through selected Husqvarna motorcycle dealers. No word on price, can't imagine they're cheap, probably not going to be found at the budget end of the market, and it seems that Puma have already done this sort of thing with Ducati. Right, so okay, now I'm moving on to something else product-wise. I'm always on the lookout for inexpensive security systems. Now, it's all very well to say that you can put a tracker on your bike, and there are indeed subscription-based trackers, but they do tend to be pretty pricey. You know, if you've just downloaded £20,000 of your hard cash to purchase a bike, maybe the cost of a tracker isn't too significant. But if you own a bike that's already a few years on in its life, or maybe you own something that never cost that much to buy in the first place, the cost of the high-tech tracking systems is a very significant chunk of money. But the inconvenience of having the bike stolen is no less to a rider who's only paid maybe £2,000 or £3,000 for a bike as it is to somebody who's paid £20,000 or £25,000 for a bike. So here's something that may be of interest to riders on a budget. Now, this is the Muc-Off AirTag holder. To give it its full title, it is the Muc-Off Secure AirTag holder for power sports. Now, it's a slightly cumbersome name for what is actually quite a little case, which offers a reasonably secure way to lock up your AirTag on the motorcycle. Just to zoom in on it a little bit there so you can see it a little bit more clearly. Now, how this works is that you use the Find My app on your phone or Apple connected device, and with that you have at least a chance of tracking down your bike should some ne'er-do-well have wheeled it away. Now, the way the system works is that the AirTag constantly is pinged by nearby Apple devices, so they don't have to be your own phones. You don't have to be in range of the AirTag personally to get a signal from it. The signal is distributed to your phone via the cloud, but it's encrypted. It can't be accessed by the phone which has actually picked up your tag, but the advantage is that wherever the tag is in the world, you can see where that tag is. Now, people are using these things for airport luggage, for example, to track down where their suitcases disappeared to, but of course enterprising people have used it for bicycles and for motorcycles too. So the holder there, it's two-part. It's made from what's to be a heat-resistant polymer, and there's an aluminium frame that locks it, and that clamps with some silicone inserts using that sort of screw clamp thing that you can see on the top of the picture there. It's locked together with what are called high security Torx screws. Frankly, if you've got a screwdriver, you can undo Torx screws. You just need the right shape. It's not that difficult, and I wouldn't expect that anybody would bother anyway. They'd just cut it off or something, or just rip it off. And that's small enough to be hidden away out of sight. Excuse me. You can get a sense of the size of the device there because there's a battery terminal next to it. I wouldn't have said that the suggestions of under the seat or behind the fairing would be particularly difficult to spot. Now, Alex Trimnall, he's the CEO at Muc-Off, he said, we're committed to making motorcycling ownership fun and easy as it can be, and what could be less fun than having your bike stolen. Yep, fully agree with that. Bikes have and always will be an attractive target for thieves, so technologies like Apple AirTag can be a great defence. Now, bear in mind, of course, that the Apple AirTag isn't actually included in the price that you'll pay. They will set you back between £30 and £35 each. The good news is that an AirTag should keep going for more than a year on the standard battery, and the battery is replaceable. It's said to be easy to do as well, and your iPhone will let you know when it's time to pop a new one in. Now, of course, you do have to buy into the Apple ecosystem to use the AirTag, and if you don't already have an iPhone, that could be a steep entry point. But one thing you can do, of course, is look for a second-hand phone. AirTags are compatible with iPhones, iPads, or iPod Touch devices that are capable of running iOS or iPad SoS 14.5 or later, including the iPhone 6s upwards, which includes apparently the iPhone SE 1, 2 and 3. So I did have a look and I found you could actually find the iPhone SE 2 at around about 120 to 140 pounds, which is pretty wallet friendly for Apple devices. Now, one other point, the Muc-Off case is not fully waterproof, it's just water resistant, and frankly, seeing as Muc-Off sells so many bike cleaning products, that's a bit of a surprise. I would really, for the price of 50 quid, which is what the holder costs, I would have hoped it would have been fully waterproof. Now, here's the alternative though. You can buy a basic AirTag keyring holder for £4 on Amazon, and that's waterproof. Now, with what you save, you could actually buy a second AirTag, and here's my idea: put one where it can be reasonably easily found and spend a bit more time hiding another where casual thieves are unlikely to look for it. But if you do want a Muc-Off AirTag holder, it is now available from the global dealer network, from selected e-retailers and direct from Muc-Off themselves. Okay, so let's round off today's news with a quick look at a new motorcycle. Here we go, lovely atmospheric shot, really, isn't it? Very beautifully done. That is the CFMoto 700 MT, which slots in between their existing 650 MT and 800 MT Adventure Tourers. Now, rather than being a completely new bike, it appears to be derived from the 650. There is a chromoly steel tube frame, aluminium swing arm. They appear to be identical to the 650, and certainly the wheelbase of the two bikes is exactly the same. The bike itself gets 17-inch cast wheels, and that makes its likely riding habitat pretty obvious, really, doesn't it? Even if the road-oriented tyres that you can see there didn't. Now, what the tyres are, I've heard conflicting reports. They could be CSTs, that's Chen Sing for those who don't know, or they could be Pirellis, and I'd certainly hope for the European tyre to come to Europe. I had a bad experience with a CST tyre some years back when I had to fit one in an emergency after a puncture, and within 800 miles the tyre was not only half worn out but it had delaminated, so I really wouldn't want to see CSTs on a bike here. The front is a 120s, the rear is a 160, so they are at least sizes where you can get plenty of options from mainstream manufacturers if you look for them. Braking, fairly basic. You get 2-piston J-Joan calipers up front, single rear disc, ABS naturally. Up front you get 43mm upside down forks, 140mm of travel. The side mounted shock is very similar to the Kawasaki's as well. No word on adjustment, so I guess they're probably preload only at the rear. One thing that did catch my eye, the adjustable seat is pretty high. The rider's portion is at 820mm, that's 32.3 inches, and it actually goes up another 20mm, which takes it to a tad over 33 inches, which is roughly the same as the V-Strom 1000 I rode in New Zealand. I did find that a bit too tall for comfort, so the extra the extra 20mm lower for the standard seat would make it a little bit more comfortable, but it's still pretty tall. By comparison, my XJ6 is at 785mm, which is just under 31 inches. Now, any other things that you should know about the bike? Well, you get a new 5.5-inch display, you get full LED lighting, you get 2 USB sockets, Type A and Type C. The motor itself is already seen on the CLX 700, which has been released some months back. It's a 693 liquid-cooled 8-valve parallel twin engine, originally based on the ER6 from Kawasaki. Power output fairly modest, 49 kilowatts, 66 horsepower at 6,000 RPM, 60 newton meters or 44.3 pounds-feet of torque at relatively low revving, 725 100 RPM, and that should make it a reasonably good road bike, I would have thought, as long as the torque curve is reasonably flat, and it's probably likely to be if it's not particularly high revving. Euro 5 engine, of course. Now, ready to roll rate is fairly porky. It's 218 kilograms or 581 pounds, but the tank does hold 18 litres, 4 gallons of fuel. And naturally, if you want to empty your wallet a little bit further, there are options including crash bars and panniers. Now the bike is available black or white, and it should be in CFMoto's new KTM backed UK dealers in just a week or so. Price a wallet friendly £6,699 on the road, and I think it's actually quite an attractive looking motorcycle. So anyway, there we go. Right, now let's move on to the final point today, and that is the in-depth look I've been doing at some road safety campaigns on the last few Sundays. Now I started with one in Warwickshire. I took a quick look at one in Northumbria. The Warwickshire poster campaign, what they said was they were being put up at crash hotspots to put up the Think Bike and Ride Safely posters. But I looked at a website called CollisionPlot, and that gave me data for 10 years. It gave me the ability to pinpoint each crash in which a rider was injured or killed. And I looked at the two roads they'd chosen, discovered one that had lots of crashes but didn't need signs, and the other, which did need an intervention, had zero fatalities and only one serious crash in 10 years. So my guess was, in fact, the signs were going up on roads that bikers were riding on rather than ones that were risky. When I did get to look at the data and try to zoom in on exactly where the accidents were, it was fairly obvious where they were happening. Here's the collision plot. This is Rugby, which is right in the middle of the county, and you can see pretty clearly from that diagram what's going on. The crashes are mostly distributed along the arterial roads in and out of town, with a scattergun of crashes on the sort of residential roads. The dots reveal just where the crashes actually happen. The green crashes are minor injuries, the blue crashes are serious injuries, and the red crashes are fatal injuries. And the numbers on the blobs tell you how many crashes there actually are, and you can see that some sites, for example, have multiple crashes around the town centre there, all in close proximity to each other. So that was the first thing I noticed, was that in the town, a number of incidents involving pedestrians. But when I actually looked at some of the other crash data, I found something that really quite astonished me. Out along the busy arterial roads, the crashes tended to cluster at roundabouts. Now, this is the road out of Rugby to the north, the one that didn't need the ride safely or look out for bikes intervention, and have a look at where those crashes happen. There's a cluster there at the bottom around one roundabout, and then as you come up towards the motorway here, you'll see there's a whole bunch of other crashes going on. There's some on the motorway itself, but a lot of them are actually happening at or about the island, and really that's a bit of a surprise to me. I've always tended to think that Urban Junction Smidsey is the big problem, and I was really quite surprised when I actually looked at these diagrams and found that just how many collisions happened at or near roundabouts. So what I did was next is I went looking to see if the pattern was the same elsewhere. Now I'll have a quick look at this one. Again, I'll zoom in on the picture for you. This is a roundabout in Rugby as well, and again what you can see is that you can see there are collisions happening at or about the roundabout, either on the access roads into the roundabout or on the access roads out, or actually on the island itself. And I thought maybe it's just Rugby, maybe things are different when you go somewhere else. So this is a town I know pretty well. This is Banbury, which isn't far away from Rugby. And again, have a look at the crashes. We've got 3 roundabouts on this particular chart, and as you can see, you have a cluster of roundabout. You have a roundabout here with a cluster of crashes on it. You have another roundabout here with a cluster of crashes on it, and this is all on the arterial road that leads into town from the M40, where there are also some crashes on the roundabout. So once again, another roundabout down there with a crash on it. A few crashes elsewhere, but most of them on the roundabouts. And let's go to Oxford and have a quick look at an area of Oxford, and again a city that I know very well indeed. And here we have some crashes happening on the main access route into Oxford City from this is the A40. We've got a crash here. We've got a couple of crashes on the bypass, and we have one or two which are in the three in fact which are off in the residential streets. That's actually four, isn't it? There's one there, one there, one there, and one there. But look at the cluster. That's where the accidents in number are happening again. It's that busy roundabout, the A40 coming into Oxford and the A40 Northern bypass round Oxford town centre. And that basically is what happened pretty much wherever I looked. Wherever I zoomed in on a roundabout, I would find a cluster of bike crashes. And I'll be honest, I'm really quite stunned by that. I suppose I shouldn't be. Roundabouts are places where we're all changing speed, we're all changing direction, different traffic flows are merging and diverging, so there's a lot of potential for conflict, something I've been talking about in one of the written post series just recently. So, you know, perhaps my surprise is I just didn't actually think about it hard enough, but I will certainly be thinking a lot harder about roundabouts from now on as I negotiate them, and perhaps we all ought to. I shall certainly be thinking about roundabouts in a little bit more detail on my articles about staying safe on the bike. Right, that is it for today. If you are out there on the bike, watch out for the weather. There are thunderstorms around. As I was recording the show earlier, it was in the middle of a thunderstorm. It seems to have rolled over now and cleared away, but it will be a bit patchy in different parts of the country. It could be quite stormy, so do take care if you're out and about, and stay shiny side up.